The plane was nearly ready for takeoff when everything stopped. Passengers watched in disbelief as a man was forcefully pulled from his seat. Accused without evidence, judged without explanation. To them, he looked like just another traveler who didn't belong in first class. What they didn't know was that he was one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. And within hours, a single phone call would trigger a chain reaction so devastating that the airline's entire future would collapse. This wasn't just a flight delay, it was the beginning of a reckoning no one saw coming. He had flown countless times before. Airports, lounges, first-class cabins, none of it was new to him. As the CEO of a global technology firm, travel was simply part of life. That morning, he moved through the terminal calmly, dressed simply, carrying himself without arrogance. His boarding pass confirmed his seat. First class. Everything was in order. The cabin was quiet and polished, filled with executives, investors, and frequent flyers. He settled into his seat, reviewing notes for an upcoming meeting that could reshape thousands of jobs. To him, this flight was routine. To others, his presence seemed to raise questions no one voiced, at first. A few minutes later, discomfort surfaced. A nearby passenger whispered to a flight attendant. Glances followed. Subtle, suspicious, lingering. The CEO noticed but ignored it. Experience had taught him that attention often came without reason. Then a supervisor arrived. Calm, professional on the surface, but hesitant. A request was made to verify his seat assignment. He complied without resistance. The information matched perfectly. Still, the tension remained. What should have ended there didn't. Because for some people, proof was never enough. The situation escalated quickly. Another complaint had been made. This time, it carried weight. The supervisor returned with a stern expression, explaining that the CEO needed to leave the aircraft temporarily, while the issue was resolved. No clear reason was given. No apology offered. Passengers watched closely. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others recorded discreetly. The CEO remained composed, asking only for clarification. None came. Security was called. The atmosphere changed instantly. Calm turned to shock. The CEO was told to stand. When he hesitated, confused, not defiant, hands reached for him. The moment was surreal. A man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals was now being treated like a threat. As he was dragged down the aisle, murmurs filled the cabin. Phones were raised. Faces froze in disbelief. There was no violence from him. No resistance. Just dignity stripped away in front of strangers. He was removed from the plane and left standing at the gate. Humiliated, surrounded by silence. The flight departed without him. But what the airline failed to realize was that this wasn't a man without options. As he stood there, he made a single phone call. Within minutes, legal teams were mobilized. Corporate boards were alerted. Media contacts were notified. What happened on that flight wasn't going to disappear. It was about to explode. The video went viral before the plane even landed. Headlines followed. Analysts weighed in. Civil rights organizations demanded answers. The man's identity was revealed, and the narrative shifted instantly. This wasn't just discrimination. This was a catastrophic mistake. The CEO's company was a major investor in aviation infrastructure, technology systems, and airline financing. His influence stretched deep into the industry. Contracts were reviewed. Partnerships paused. Funding pipelines frozen. Regulators launched investigations. Internal airline emails leaked, exposing a pattern of appeasing complaints rooted in bias. Executives attempted damage control, issuing apologies that sounded hollow. Against the footage replayed millions of times. Stock prices collapsed in real time. Within days, investors pulled out. Lawsuits piled up. Insurance providers reassessed risk. The airline's market value dropped by $52 billion as trust evaporated overnight. What began as a baseless assumption had now triggered one of the largest corporate disasters in aviation history, and there was no undoing it. The airline never fully recovered. Executives resigned. Entire departments were dismantled. Routes were cut. Within months, restructuring talks turned into survival talks. The brand became a case study, not in innovation, but in failure driven by prejudice. The CEO never sought revenge. He sought accountability. Publicly, he remained composed. Privately, he ensured the system faced consequences it could no longer avoid. For him, the incident was painful, but familiar. What made it different was visibility. For once, the world saw exactly how quickly power could be abused, and how devastating the cost could be. This story wasn't about wealth or status. It was about perception, about how assumptions override facts, about how dignity can be denied in seconds, and how silence allows it to happen again and again. The airline lost $52 billion. But the real loss was something deeper: credibility, trust, and the belief that fairness was optional. The question is no longer whether injustice exists. The question is, what happens when the person you underestimate has the power to change everything?